Another month, another podcast, uh, another bunch of topics to talk about. Um, Welcome, Lisa. Glad to have you back. Um, and yeah, thanks for all those who join and listen and pay attention to our ramblings. Um, so this month's been a bit quiet. I think, well, a bit quiet in terms of the news, cybersecurity side, but I think we as people in our own professional lives are pretty darn busy. We were just having this discussion before we joined. Um, anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
Oh, I think everyone I've spoken to is just exhausted to a new level. Like, I know most years we get to this point and we feel tired, but for some reason, everybody is just at a different level of exhaustion this year. Like, people
Yeah,
are struggling to hold conversations, as will be very evident in this podcast. I don't know why it is. I mean, I think obviously attacks have been up. There's been a lot of work. There's been a lot of drive. There's been obviously conflicts in the world that have driven stuff up, and it just feels like a never-ending wave of bad news that we have to deal with.
yeah, that's certainly true. I think a daunting and negative um, world that we live in. And yeah, it'd be nice to have some positive news come about now and then.
I did
Um,
see on Instagram someone has put cameras in forests and ended up with loads of bear selfies. So bears coming. So that's kind of positive.
that's awesome.
It's the best news we've got. So beggars can't be choosers. Go and check out the bear selfies because they're hilarious.
That's awesome. Animals are really cool. I love animals. Animals are,
Should have worked
um,
with animals better.
yeah, I should have become a zookeeper or something, or game ranger, something like that. They often give you far more laughs and less hassle until they try to eat you. But hey, can't blame the
That's true in
animal, right?
cyber as well, though. So
They'll eat you up and spit you out.
yeah,
Yeah. So as I said, like it's been a pretty quiet month. I can't recall anything. Wait, there was something that was pretty interesting. That was interesting, clever, and funny.
hmm
Um,
I know
and
what you're
that
gonna. I
was
know. I think I know what you're gonna do with this.
okay. Well, what is it?
I think you're gonna go with the ransomware group that reported their own attack to the SEC.
Yes, yes. We have to talk about that because that was I'm gonna call it sheer genius. I mean, I'm obviously not a fan of people ransomware and people on that, and it's not great, but you got to hand it to them.
You
That
have.
was just out of the box thinking, sheer genius. Like
Yeah.
no one saw that coming. And in
Yeah.
a
I think
sense,
so.
there's a humorous side to it. Obviously, not for those affected. That's not great, but the fact that
Yeah.
that
And
was
I think it just shows I think it shows two things, which is, but neither of which are ultimately good. One is that they are really, really smart, and literally they will do anything if they think it's going to put pressure on you. That's the first thing. The second thing is they have a really dark sense of humor. All of the ransomware groups have a really dark sense of humor that, on some level, we find really funny. And there's this kind of like subtext to the whole horrific dynamic that we've got going on, where it actually ends up being quite funny, where they put out the promo videos and we all laugh and they laugh, and it's become this sort of really weird dynamic that's just not, it's like the most toxic imaginable dynamic, really. But
yeah,
yeah, and the other thing that happened that I thought, it's not funny, but it's kind of also indicates like a level of sophistication, I think, in a lot of threat actors, was the Israel Gaza situation. The ceasefire was, the terms were agreed. I believe hostages have now been released.
yep.
But what was interesting was a lot of the major hacktivist groups who are not associated with the state or ostensibly controlled by the state actually said that they will abide by the terms of the ceasefire and stop hacking each other, which they do
Huh,
seem to have done, which is also really
okay.
strange.
Interesting.
Um, I think it just shows a level of sophistication, but also a desire for them to be taken seriously, you know?
Mm. Okay, that is interesting. I'm not aware of that. Um, that is interesting. Um, Also, just coming back to the first point, just in case people who are listening aren't aware what happened. So, organization got ransomware. Um, I can't remember if they uh, claimed that they weren't going to pay up or they just failed to meet the demand. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They didn't pay the ransomware for whatever reason. So the attackers turned around and said, "Okay, fine. We're going to go off to the SEC and do a SEC filing to say that this company was breached," which in itself a double form of activism, uh,
Yeah.
double form of ransomware. But it is pretty interesting how they use legitimate controls against organizations.
Yeah, and I've seen, in some ways it's not that surprising because I've seen them sign legal agreements with
Yep.
companies as well that will say, like, we promise to delete the data, we promise to not attack you again for 2 years, we promise this, we promise that. How the hell you actually enforce that legal agreement if it went south, I really don't know. But there's obviously some comfort that general counsels get in negotiating and signing this agreement with them. So I
Got
think it
on that.
does show that, like, they've got better business sense than we give them credit for.
Yeah, and one other thing that actually really scares me about these attackers and that is just how creative they are. I mean,
Yeah.
not like I don't. Someone in the security industry probably would have thought about that eventually, but like they are just one step ahead of us all the time because they just think of these weird things, caveats that we would never, most of us would never ever think of. And
Yeah.
then when you actually think about it, it's like, that's actually pretty darn clever. Why didn't we
Yeah.
think of that before? And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face when we against these people is not only they're very good from a technical point of view, they have money in that, just the sheer creativity that they have is just astounding.
Yeah. And I wonder whether the future really, so Rick Ferguson posted um something on, I saw it on LinkedIn, where he was talking about how ransomware in terms of malware really isn't a great attack anymore, and it's the double extortion element of it that puts pressure to pay, i.e. the stealing of the
Yeah.
data and holding it hostage. So I wonder, and I sort of agree with Rick, I think they still use the malware because it's kind of that big bang moment where it's like, you've been hit and now we've also got your data. But I don't think into and of itself it's a great attack. Um, but I wonder whether the fight against ransomware from our side really needs to come from a business perspective. So speaking to like top level CEOs and CFOs in terms of how would you disrupt that business model, as opposed to a technical cyber defense, in a sense. Maybe it's our strategy globally needs to come more from a business level, because that's really where they're defeating us at the moment.
Yeah, because a lot of these groups do operate much like a business, and many of us just assume that it's just some hodgepodge of people doing things randomly, and like some more groups have like paid time off and all of this stuff that
Yeah.
legitimate business has. And if we start looking at them more like a business, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And how we disrupt that from a business aspect. Never thought of it that way.
No, I literally just thought of that for 2 seconds a minute ago. I was like, hold on a minute, have I just had a thought? It's
An
quite
epiphany.
unusual. I'm really tired. I'm not really having many thoughts right now, so this is cool.
Well, let's start our own
Recorded, we can prove it. I had an idea.
ransomware as a service. We're going to disrupt the ransomware markets to do good things and prevent people
Like
ransomware and
Airbnb,
people.
but for ransomware.
Yeah. Ah, geez. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else also happened this past month. It's just been a blur, really. I mean,
Mm.
just tired.
So Boeing got hit. That was the other
Yeah.
big company. Uh, Boeing got hit. They were, as per usual, placed up on the website with their logo. And then before the timer was up, they got removed from the website. I'm not saying
Mm,
why. I'm not saying why a ransomware group might remove someone from the site and stop making references to dumping data. I'm not going to allude to what that might be. But yeah, they were removed. So I'll let everybody watching join those two dots up together.
s- so aside from whether they paid or whether they didn't, another interesting take that we've seen happen several times is groups claiming they've breached an organization when in fact in reality is they haven't. And they then use that as a leverage to try extort that company. I forgot who was the most recent one. There was one recently. Um, my brain's giving me up.
I think there was the
But the,
Dark Tracer situation, and I forget the ransomware group that made that mistake. I can't remember which group it
oh
was.
yeah, they
And
completely.
they wrote, we've we've just hit Dark Trace. And obviously I'm pretty sure this is what it was. And everybody in the industry is like, oh my God, Dark Trace has been hit. And it turned out they'd missed an R off the
Yeah, something like that.
and they
Like
issued an
whoopsie.
apology and they were like, we're so sorry. This was a comms error. That's not who we
Get
hit.
the
We hit
marketing
these guys.
team out. Yeah, but
Oh dear.
it the ones I've seen, I don't know if they are doing it purposefully or is it like a mistake like that. But if you think about it, that's another legitimate means for them, or from their perspective, legitimate, of extorting companies. Like, we'll put your name in the media for the wrong reasons unless you pay us,
Yeah.
and they don't even have to do anything. And this is probably, I guess, one of the problems that we have around all the hype around some of these attacks is sensationalist headlines, clicks, likes, follows, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But did it really happen?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting one, and I think it will be interesting to see where it evolves next year. But there's two really interesting developments. So we've seen more ransomware attacks declared, or obvious ransomware attacks this year, than we have in the last couple of years combined. So it's gone up exponentially. That's the first concerning issue. The second thing that I learned recently was that actually, for the first time ever, really in history, ransomware groups now have so much money they can actually outbid nation states on 0 days. So purchasing 0 days, they actually have enough money now to be able to do that. And that changes the threat landscape significantly. So that means that a lot of the companies who think that we've got this, we've got that, we would stop ransomware, it wouldn't happen. It now very much could.
Yeah. And that's always the thing about ransomware that worried me. Like, yeah, there's this whole thing of do you pay, do you not pay? And I'm not gonna get into the philosophical debate of whether you pay or whatnot. There's arguments for and against. But one of the things that worries me about when you do pay is you're now funding a criminal organization who will now have more money to go do further bad things. Now, that's definitely an ethical dilemma, a moral dilemma, and that. But putting all the other things aside, that's probably my biggest concern around when you do pay these groups.
Mm-hmm.
You're now funding them to go off and do further bad things.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think that's, for me, a lot of the arguments around they publish the data anyway, we've shown that's not the case. They release the data, they'll hack you again, no evidence to suggest that's the case. They seem to be very true to their word from the upfront negotiations. Also, the tenuous links to human trafficking and drugs trafficking. Again, there's been no real evidence that these ransomware groups are doing human trafficking and drugs trafficking. We can't trace the money, so you can't really find out where the money goes anyway. But again, for, like what you said, my big concern is if you do pay, I'm not really that fussed about a lot of the other things. I think it's a business decision, should be left as such. The problem is they are now richer than we are. And the more money they get, the less possible it is for us in any meaningful way to defend against the attacks.
Yep. Yep. Especially if you're a smaller company. Maybe larger companies like of Apple or Microsoft and that, they generally be okay because they've got very deep pockets. But what about all the SMEs? There's no chance they're going to have any chance standing up to them. Not a chance in
No.
hell. And it's just going to get worse and worse. So
Hospitals, schools,
yeah,
not going to happen.
it's difficult, and I understand like when you're in that position, it's not. There is no right or wrong answer. It sucks any way you look at it, whatever decision you make.
Yeah.
So I hopefully, touch wood, I'll never be in that situation.
Yeah.
But you never know. And these are the types of things that you need to think about beforehand, so you can think about it rationally rather than reactively, and kind of have a stance before you go into these things.
So from my perspective, obviously what I do, my sort of day job when I'm not climbing ice walls, which I don't get paid for, sadly, go into companies and essentially test and run scenarios and build operational resilience. And one of the basically every client bar a couple this year have wanted ransomware, and those are for by and large companies, usually financial services companies. They've got very deep pockets, and they are very concerned about their vulnerability to that. So if you're sitting there and you're a smaller company or you're an SME and you're thinking, oh, it's probably not going to happen to me. If those companies are worried about it, you should be worried about it, because if it affects them, it will definitely be affecting you.
Yep. If a criminal can make even $1 off you, you're a target. Ready?
Yeah.
Take 1,000 people, that's $1,000 for the criminal, often with little effort. So
speaking of $1,000, funny anecdote as before we wrap up the ransomware groups. So when Lockbit launched their new, I think it was Lockbit 3.0, their new strain, their new product, big product release, they basically, the brand Supreme, the clothing brand. It kind of does these drops. So it releases like a new product, like a new shirt or a new pair of trainers or something, and it will do like a drop where there's a certain number of things available to buy at a certain price, and everyone goes crazy for it, and it's like been a situation that's worked really well. So Lockbit decide to emulate this, and they say for the first however many people it was, I forget, if you get a tattoo with our logo on your arm, we will give you $1,000. And there was, if you Google this, the photos of people who have gone out and got Lockbit tattooed onto their arm. And we think that we're winning this battle. We're not winning.
No.
People are literally tattooing ransomware groups' logos onto their arms. Where do you go with that?
That's one way of marketing, I suppose.
Yeah, really genius.
The best part is great. They're with you forever until you get a laser off or something like that. But otherwise it's there forever.
But that's how little they also care about getting caught.
Yeah.
You don't even need to be quiet. You can just literally start a viral Twitter campaign. Like, it literally doesn't matter. No one's catching you. Good times.
It's certainly interesting. Like 10 years ago, if you said this to someone, they would have been like, "What are you on? Like,
exactly.
What planets are you on?"
Yeah.
You look at it, it's like,
Doesn't even surprise me.
Doesn't even really make much of a news headline or anything like that.
Give it 5 years, and you will see like Vice Society's logo on an F1 car or something.
Go to a security conference. See what the criminal.
They'll have booths.
Oh, jeez. It's gonna be. I think the next few years is gonna be interesting. But yeah,
it's kind of in that category of funny, not funny.
Yeah, exactly. Worrying. But hey, keeps us on the job, right?
Yeah. So one of the other topics you wanted to talk about, which I'll let you lead on because this is one of your little pet rants, as I know.
I'm gonna get my little my big soapbox and rant about this. So this is around there is no skills shortage. There's a skills shortage, whatever way you look at it. I get extremely frustrated around when people say there is no skills shortage. Um, I know there is, because I've been looking for someone. And it's not just one position. I've had this numerous times over the years. Like trying to find people in AppSec is difficult. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say impossible, but it is difficult, and it's getting harder and harder. If you think about it logically in terms of like AppSec, what you're looking for is really someone with development background, ideally. I emphasize ideally, um, with development background and security interest, and has some experience,
Mhm.
especially for organizations that are looking to build up the application security program from nothing. You need someone with experience. Great. How many organizations are there in the world who have their own internal development function? Versus how many organizations, cybersecurity organizations are there in the world? AppSec used to be something that wasn't such much of a thing in the past. It's becoming more and more important now. So you got things like PCR v4, the US government or their guidance and guidelines in order to do business with them. You have to start following all these things. So companies in the past who didn't ever have to really worry about AppSec are now suddenly finding themselves having to worry about AppSec. And now
Mhm.
they're going to have to find people to fulfill that. And it comes down to a simple thing of supply and demand. Demand's increasing. The, the talent pool for that is not suddenly growing exponentially.
No.
It's not growing with the demand.
We've
We
got a
have this
lag as
massive
well,
spike.
right? Like, if you get
Exactly.
sudden demand this year, well, that's now 3 years before the university students come through. So you've got a 3-year lag in demand.
Exactly. And when you go speak to most people, when they go, oh, I want to get into InfoSec, what do you think is the one thing they want to get involved in?
Pen testing every time.
Exactly. So there's this notion of pen testing, and then you delve a bit further. They might be interested in threat intelligence, red teaming, or the exciting, the wow jobs. I'm not saying they aren't important; they're really important, but there's a large emphasis on that, and there's not much on like the blue team, purple team side of things. So
Yeah.
there's already that to contend with.
Yeah.
And for people to turn around and say, "Oh, there's no problem." Last night I saw a thing on LinkedIn that I really got frustrated with, because it was things like, "Oh,
No, really? On LinkedIn? That's so out of
I
character.
know, I know." It was things like, "You're not hiring the right, you're not approaching you're hiring." This person was saying that your approach to hiring, not to me directly, just a post, just making that clear. Um, uh, your approach to hiring is wrong. The amount you're offering is wrong, and that. And these people are saying this without having any context into those people like myself who
Mhm.
are battling to find people.
Yeah, and I
And
think, can I
it's
just add, like, there's the finding people like you're saying, but I've spoken to people at like the San CISO Summit and a couple others about this exact issue. And the one issue that comes up time and time again, it's not even necessarily the recruitment per se, it's recruitment and retention. Because one thing that a lot of companies can't offer are these big salaries that the big banks can offer. So the
yep,
big financial houses can throw six-figure salaries at everybody. Like, you've seen some of the salaries, absolutely ridiculous for some of the people who work in AppSec, some of the people who work doing all sorts of cybersecurity jobs, absolutely insane money. And the other companies can't offer that. So
nope,
these security teams are being built out in these banks, which is great. And I'm not for one moment saying we don't need to protect our banks. We 100% do. The problem is, though, all the talent drains that way, and there's nothing at all left in the experience category. So I'm not talking like entry level positions.
yep,
That all drains away, and people stay in a job for a year and then leave, which costs money to train them. By the time
yep,
you've got your feet under the desk and you really understand the job role, you're looking at a good few months into starting. Like, no one just hits the ground running.
yep,
And then you leave because some bank has offered you £700,000 instead of 80K that you're earning at this other job, however meaningful that job is.
Yep. It really is that. I've faced that, and I get some of the points being made. Like there are cases where, let's face it, some of the job specs are absolutely horrendous. Like they expect you to be an expert in everything. We've seen the ones where they expect you to have more experience than the actual technology has been around and all that. That is certainly a very valid case. But to turn around and say that is always the case is wrong. When we interview people, one of the things I like doing is I hate the interview process. Like your traditional interview process where you get to ask a bunch of really technical questions and all that. I don't believe in that. My approach to the interview process is let's have a discussion. Let's have a scenario and you play it out with me. Let's have a discussion around that, because guess what? That is more realistic to what actually happens in your job. It's easier on the candidates. They don't have to have the right answer. There is no right or wrong answer. You can test how they apply their knowledge. It's more relaxed for them, and it's a discussion, which is a lot easier. And then we need 6 round interviews as well. Just drives me bonkers. Like I don't see the value in that. So
the other side of the fence on this, in some respects, that I find, and I'm not sure if you find this as well. So on LinkedIn, what often happens is I get these messages for people, and they're almost always people who have had another career and they want to transition into cybersecurity. And they message me asking for advice, but it's very apparent in certainly the first 1 or 2 messages, that they've done no research whatsoever into cybersecurity. They have no idea the different job roles. They have no idea what the threat landscape is. They've probably just Googled like up and coming industries or growth industries. And cyber obviously comes right at the top. And it's frustrating to me because these people want your time, they want your effort. And I'm more than happy to give that to people. But when you don't have even enough motivation to go and research and listen to some podcasts and think, I want to go into pen testing, or I want to go into DFIR, or I want to, whatever area you want to go into, AppSec, whatever, and start researching that, and then find people who work in AppSec or work in incident response like me, or work in pen testing like Holly, or whatever it is, and then target them. I find that very frustrating because when we all got into the industry, we've all had to do that. Nothing has been handed to any single one of us. And I feel like it's got to also, if you're wanting to get into an industry where there is opportunity, there's a ton of opportunity, you're not suitable for cybersecurity, in my opinion, if you can't take the time to go and research. Because one of our whole things in cybersecurity is, oh my God, there's so much reading. I could literally fill my entire week just keeping up with what's going on. So if you can't do that at the very beginning, it's not the career for you.
That's a very valid point to make.
Someone just asked, Lisa, you transitioned from law, didn't you? How did that happen? That is a whole other story. A whole series of random decisions, really, more than strategic decision making in any capacity. So I won't get into that, but let's just say I went a bit like this.
But it is. And then one of the other things that also irks me about it is, probably in the larger organizations, this is not much of an issue, but where it's like, oh, you could just hire a junior person and train them up. And I know, like, I would love to do that. I would really love to do that. In my current position, I just can't. So what will happen is you have someone comes in, gets no support, is going to fail as a result, and no one wins. Like, it's not helping anyone. That's where larger organizations have the capacity, or generally should have the capacity and that to do that. And I do try to help outside of my role, but if I had to do it on a professional level, it would be nigh on impossible at the moment. Generally, what you find is, especially teams are building themselves out, they need the higher skilled, experienced people first. Then they have the capacity to take on the less skilled and train them up. And again, that's why I think trying to say there is no skills shortage is kind of like burying your head in the sand. Um, and I think the other problem that we have with this whole thing is we treat it as a whole, right? Cybersecurity is a very diverse field, range of roles. You got things from you don't even have to touch a computer ready to fulfill your role, and that's like physical penetration testing, site security, and all of that, all the way to like really technical stuff to non-technical stuff such as your GRC based stuff, your governance, your risk. So there's a very wide ranging set of skills that are needed for different roles. To say that there is no skill shortage across all of those is frankly bonkers. And to say also there's a skill shortage across all of that is also a bit bonkers. I think what we need to do is like there's a skill shortage in certain areas of it, and that's
Mhm.
maybe where we get the shift away around getting people more interested in some of maybe the less glamorous roles or the roles that are difficult to fill.
Yeah. And I think that's something that in medicine, for example, they've had that problem for a while. You've often heard
Yeah,
like, oh, we really need radiologists or we need heart surgeons or whatever. Like we've got a lack of these. So you have to go find them, and whether you bring them in from other countries or whether you start pushing to train people up and get people into it, offering incentives to move across into that area or that discipline, etc. There's lots of strategies to move it around, but you wouldn't go, well, we have a real shortage of all doctors,
yeah,
because that's, it's the same sort of thing. A GP is very different to a heart surgeon, and I certainly wouldn't want a GP coming into the operating theatre and being like, well, have a go. I read this textbook this one time
yeah.
and I watched the Darknet Diaries. I think I'm probably pretty good. I would be like,
I
no,
got
you know
this.
what? I'm good. So, like, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's coming back down to earth and from all parties being realistic. So as I mentioned, some roles and specs out there are just bonkers. And then also some expectations from candidates. And I think some of those expectations are fostered in some of the larger organizations who are paying these crazy salaries.
Crazy salaries.
And then they see that and go, well, that's the norm. That's what I expect. And we all need to come back to earth and start being a bit more realistic about our expectations. Um, Heck, some of the job roles I'm being like, that's looking very interesting. Hope my boss isn't listening. I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, I look at some of those salaries and go, wow, okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable. I mean, I had this argument on or debates on Twitter the other day, where I think these large, massive salaries are just not sustainable.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point where it's just going to burst, and
Yeah.
guess who's the first one's going to go? Yeah. So it's a difficult situation to be in. Um, but ultimately, I think we need to accept there is a problem in certain parts, and how do we work together to try remedy or improve that? I don't
Mhm.
know what the answer is. Certainly, in terms of like university and that, I think universities and that also need to come to the party. Because even cybersecurity courses, like if I want to go do an AppSec course, I don't think there's really anything out there. It's
No.
more specialized, like security operations and that kind of stuff, or computer science, which I don't even know if they've now started integrating some of the security elements into it.
Yeah, and I think again, it's also the job range is so diverse, and so therefore the skill set is really diverse as well.
Yep.
Like you can be amazing at, let's just say, malware analysis, right? And you're one of these people who can just get into the zone and just work, and you're brilliant at that, but you can't communicate anything at all, right? For whatever reason, those skills are lacking. So doing something like my role would be impossible,
Yep.
and vice versa. And I think that's the other problem, that actually you need a full spectrum of people to do a full spectrum of jobs, and channeling everyone through university computer science or cybersecurity courses isn't necessarily the way forward,
Yeah.
because actually you need people who can deliver training, who are really great at communicating complex principles to people who speak to the board, people who, write reports, and all of those skill sets come from different disciplines.
Yep. Exactly. Because I think one of the things that I got taught this on very early on in my career. The lessons that you learn from screwing things up rather than doing things well. Um, the one day my boss called me aside and said, "Hey, Sean, your technical skills are that great. Your soft skills, eh." And that
Seconded.
stuck with me ever since. And it's very true. So when we think of cybersecurity, think of the hacky keyboard, bang bang bang. But there's a whole range of soft skills that you also need for many job roles, as you mentioned. Like a CISO.
Mhm.
Imagine a CISO coming into the board. I did this lead code. Yeah, we stopped them with this latest firewall rule. Blah blah blah. The board will go, "Sorry, what?
Yeah, you'd be fired.
Get
That would
out,
be it.
please."
Yeah,
Um,
there's no way.
so it's yeah, and again, coming back to the skill shortage, it's one thing having the skills, but if you're going to have someone who's like a rock star, ninja star, and all of that, like in a team, but they're like impossible to work with, I wouldn't
Yeah,
hire them.
no, you're going
That
nowhere.
destroys a team. I've seen this firsthand. How one individual can create such havoc that the team just disintegrates.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
that
think in
again comes.
cybersecurity, our job is as much about marketing as it is about technical stuff. And if you
Yeah,
can't learn marketing and learn how to sell an idea, either into the execs, into the board, to the sell training into the organization and make people do the training and make people participate in whatever schemes you've got going on, you may as well not bother, because if you can't do that, you're not going to get anywhere.
and yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of that you can't learn. Well,
No,
you do learn. You learn through experience, and you
you
learn
do.
through
Yeah.
mentorship, and
Yeah.
that's where, to original point, like where you building these functions out, you need more people with the experience, because they
Yeah.
understand how to speak to other people, other teams, the different processes, the business needs, all of
But
these
they're
kinds
earning
of things.
500,000 at the banks. They don't wanna do
Yes.
the job.
Sorry about those banks. Let's have a
Can I get
word
a list?
afterwards.
You got a name? No reason.
Um, and on a side note, if you are interested in AppSec role, our team's hiring, so wink wink. Um, but yeah, I think it's important that we be realistic from both sides. I
Mhm.
do laugh at some of the job specs out there. Just like, you scratch your head and go, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say they are getting less and less, so that's a good point. And I've seen that. Actually, I can't even remember the last time I've seen a job spec that you scratch your head and going, "Sorry, what are you on?" Um, yeah.
We saw it with big tech though. Big tech went on a hiring mission and the salaries were going absolutely crazy. And then what happened? We've seen unprecedented layoffs in the last year from the
Yep.
big tech companies. And that's the reality of it. Like you said, it doesn't last. It can't just keep going at that rate, because money isn't increasing at that rate unless you're a ransomware group, in which case it's different.
Yep. It is. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, one company I worked at, I can't say where, but the one person I hired, like, they didn't know what they were doing for the first 2 or 3 weeks. They're like, okay, whatever, dude. Yeah. And the company didn't know what they were gonna, what role he was fulfilling. And it's crazy when you think about it. But yeah, joys of Silicon Valley top style startups. Oh, that reminds me. That was the interesting thing that happened this month. OpenAI. That was
Oh yeah. Oh
that
my
was
god.
some. I know it's not security related, but that was some interesting thing. So for those who don't know, OpenAI board on Friday evening, afternoon, American time. I can't remember. Was it like, yeah, CEO, bye, you're fired. And that's that. And then by the next Monday, I think it was, or
Yeah.
Sunday, there were murmurs. Then Sunday, the interim CEO was replaced by, I think, folk from Twitch, I think it was. And that was fun. Then the ex-CEO of OpenAI got offered a role in Microsoft, and we thought that was the end of that. How wrong we were. The employees that wanted the CEO fired then went to the board and threatened to quit unless the CEO that was fired, that they wanted fired, were replaced. And it was just a mess.
Mm. And this worries me on a greater level as well, because there's some big elections coming up in the next year. And with all this turbulence, so with the big tech companies like Meta and stuff, they've laid off loads of people. What their capability is for policing those platforms, I really seriously doubt. They have the capability they have had in previous elections. Twitter, well, we're not even going to mention Twitter because we all know, God knows what's going on there. We'll draw a line under that. But then to add further complication, if you think back to the last US presidential election, the last UK general election, we didn't have ChatGPT and we didn't have AI where we're at now. Certainly not in the hands of everyday people, which adds another element. And they're not even, I don't think, at all ready to police the platforms they have created at all.
Yeah. And then you got in like all the video
Deep
AR that you can do, yeah, the deep fakes, and it's going to be interesting, scary, but interesting. We shall see. Fingers crossed that it goes okay, but it's not just people on the spectrum. I think my biggest worry is the nation state type things. So we won't mention countries by name, but there's a country, like a very big country, that currently involved in a current conflict, that potentially could benefit from, let's just say, having some influence on some elections. Those are the things I worry about. Or I don't know if it's my stream. Oh, sorry, you broke up there. I don't know if it was me or you.
Particular mysterious country that we are not naming also has a presidential election this coming year. So I wonder how that will go. I can't predict what the outcome could possibly be.
It will be totally open and fair, and
it will.
Everyone will be able to exercise their rights. Yeah. Just same as the People's Republic of some other country that we won't mention.
Yeah, there's many countries at the moment that are running very fair and honourable elections, so it's all fine. Everything's all fine.
Accidents happen.
Yeah, coincidences, lots of coincidences.
Anyway, I think on to our last topic, because I read really well, and I can read Lisa's instructions well on Twitter, and I answered really well in my answer.
I thought you were winding me up. I thought you were just trying to wind me up. That's how tired I am.
So Lisa put out a poll around the topic around like cybersecurity awareness in your organization, and I was not reading properly and trying to skim too much. She said, "Don't put all above or none," and I put none in the response. And she called me, rightly called me up for it.
It's good to know you read my tweets properly.
I was in a rush. My brain wasn't functioning. But yeah, you want to take this one, Lisa?
Yeah, so it's an interesting, I don't think it has an answer for a start. I think there's a lot of theories. I think it's very organizational dependent, but it's an interesting debate. What is the best measure, if you had to pick one or you had to pick a couple, of security culture within your employee base? And actually the poll, there were lots of varied answers, wasn't there, in it? And I think, some people measure by number of incidents, some people use phishing. I'm not a massive fan of phishing simulations, just full disclosure. I have many issues with this, which is a whole other podcast. But some people use click rate, some people use just general security reporting rate. And it's really, really difficult because actually it's something that I think boards want quantified with a number. Like, this is the number of where we're at with security culture. But actually, I think it's qualitative. I think it's more about the people, and are they talking about security, and are they interested in security and reading about it and whatever. But you can't give that a number, or you can't put that on a red, amber, green color chart for the board. So how do you take the general gist of the employee base and quantify it so that the board can go, yes, this is going well, or no, it's not?
Yeah, because even those metrics like click rates or reported things, it also very much depends on how many are getting to your organization. You could have a
Totally.
month where there's a huge amount, or a month there's like none. So you need something consistent, and I think those aren't a very accurate way. Like, I've clicked on phishing emails. I'm sure. I'm not going to answer if you have, but um, I'm sure all of us have clicked
Yeah.
on a phishing email at some point. It doesn't mean that we're not security aware or conscious of that. There's just so many different caveats to
Nuances.
these things. Yeah.
Mm.
That it doesn't make a true reflection. And in my long-winded wrong answer that I put is to your point, like it's about security culture, and you can't really measure that.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, because in my experience, like, boards want to know where I want a number. Oh my, out of 100, where do we score with security culture? And then I want to know how that compares to other organizations, and are we doing better? And those are the two things they really want to know. But how on earth do you put a number on how aware your employees are? And I know there are all these audits that apparently work out security culture and stuff, but largely they're questionnaires. I have a lot of issues with questionnaires, because just because someone answers, yes, I know I shouldn't do this, doesn't mean they're not doing that. It just means they know they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
It's different. So it's very difficult. And I think training's hard, because you can say this is the percentage of people who have completed the mandatory training, which obviously should be 100%. But how do you measure how many of them actually engage with the training versus just clicking through? I don't know.
It's a really good question, and a very difficult one to
Because if you
answer.
can't measure it, you also are struggling to measure the success of anything you do. Because anything you implement, like, let's just say you implement some online training or some webinar series, or I don't know, the CISO is going to speak to your staff on a webinar or something. If you want to say that was a success and this is the success we saw, how do you measure that? Because it's almost impossible, because, as you said, you could say, okay, reporting has gone up, great, but it might just happen that it's Black Friday and we've just had a load of phishing emails come in, and so reporting would have gone up anyway. It's difficult.
Yeah, I, I think it's just as hard as how do you get security culture going in an organization? Because if you have the answer to that, then you probably have the answer to your metric,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no answer to either at the moment.
No, we
Yeah.
certainly don't seem to have one as an industry. And I think if you look at, like, for example, environmental campaigns, right, that have been implemented across the world in pretty much every country, they've had a lot of time, years and years and years, and still we're not at a point where everyone consistently recycles, where everyone
Mm.
consistently, minimizes their carbon output and whatever. We're still not at that. We've got a level of, like, oh, I know it's a thing. I know, I know, polar bears are drowning. I get that, but I'm still gonna do this thing. And I think when you look at that and you look at how much money and how much, films and all this stuff that has been hit with to the population, and still their behavior isn't really consistent. It's like, what does it take to change culture at scale?
I know the answer.
Is it ransomware groups?
How many people have lockbit tattooed on their bodies? There we go. Problem
To be
solved.
fair, if they have lockbit tattooed on their bodies, it means they are aware of ransomware groups. At the very least, that is quantifiable and measurable.
Right.
I'm
So
not
it's not
sure
the
I'd
big
want that.
test. It's the lockbit tattoo tests.
How many of your employees have lockbit tattooed on their body? And that shows the level of awareness that your company has about ransomware. I'm not sure I'd want to watch that being presented to the board, but let us know feedback. Did it work
Yeah,
or are you sacked?
that would be an interesting conversation. Oh my gosh, I could just imagine how that goes down. And some of the
Badly.
explanations. So why do you have that tattoo on yourself?
Yeah.
What like what parts of the body are you allowed to even inspect? Like,
I
obviously,
think
there's
none. I
certain
don't think you're
parts.
allowed to
Yeah,
inspect any of parts of any employees' bodies.
yeah. Um,
This
no,
conversation has gone south quickly.
indeed. So I'm just looking at some of the comments. So Ian Fortin is made some really good comments there. So engage, understand why so they are motivated to put it into practice, as well as needed to make a personal investment. I like that. So my whole thinking around security culture and that, like most people, yes, they'll probably care about the company's money, but it's still like, oh, it's a company's money. If it's lost,
Yeah.
whatever. My money, totally different story. So if you start engaging things like phishing or attacks on, hey, this is what could happen to your account. These are things you can do at home. There's suddenly a strong incentive for them to take part in that
Yeah.
and be aware of that and take that on board. And then if they do that in the home, it becomes second nature, and then they take it over to the business. Plus, you're doing a good thing. You're helping people out, which is why, like around phishing and that, that's why I'm always against the whole notion of, oh, we should allow people to just click through and click through emails and all of that. Fine, from a company point of view, you might have the right protections in place, but you then teaching that person clicking any email is going to be fine. They're going to do it in the home on their personal email, and suddenly their entire bank account strained.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure you can measure that though, but I do
Yeah,
agree that as a strategy, it is people are intrinsically selfish. And I think you make something about somebody else, something about me,
yeah,
I'm going to be way more invested and way more
yep.
interested than if it's about something else. And I think maybe that's why the environment campaigns have struggled so much because
Mm,
the actual personal impact is pretty negligible for people like us. Our children, our children's children, that's going to be a disaster. But, you know, there's not a lot of immediate direct impact, negative impact on me if I don't recycle. So then you're relying on doing the right thing to protect others. And that's weaker than if you don't recycle that plastic, your home will flood. Do you see what I mean?
yeah, yeah. And that's maybe why things like road traffic campaigns are a bit more successful, because I don't want to die.
No, exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah,
therefore,
exactly.
I want to stick to the rules of the road and make sure I follow the rules of the road. So yeah,
It's immediacy of impact that I think makes you
yeah,
think, oh, okay, I've got to do something.
yeah. Uh, well, if anyone has any ideas, please speak to Lisa and ourselves, and we'll create a company and make a lot of money if we solve this problem.
And we'll credit you in the footnotes. That's what you get.
We'll, we'll give you a lockbit tattoo.
We'll give you
There
a
we go.
free Lockbits tattoo. We should do that as swag. You get like, the stick-on tattoos when you were a kid and you used to pretend you got a
Oh
tattoo.
god.
Those before
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to con a criminal gang organization.
not if you want to stay connected to the internet in any capacity.
Or alive.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I tend to see criminals as bad people with bad morals and that, so I just
Interestingly,
tend
though,
to
the
stay away.
ransomware groups that took on the Vegas casinos, I thought was very brave because I wouldn't want to cross them. That's a potential level of I'd be more worried about them than I would be the FBI. I can't hear you now. I don't know if you can hear me or if you can hear Sean. Someone just write in the comments which person you can hear, and then we know. Obviously, if you can't hear me, no one will be able to say anything. So, drum roll. I don't know if Sean can even hear me. Can Sean hear me? Everyone can hear Lisa. This is amazing. This has become the Lisa podcast, and there's nothing Sean can do about it. Okay, so where are we going to take this now? Lisa, we can hear you. Brilliant. That's all that matters. So yeah, I'm going to speak on behalf of Sean. Sean has agreed that he will get a lockbit tattoo. If he has 2 seconds at the moment to say something, is he going to say anything to rebut this? It doesn't look like it, folks. So that looks like tacit compliance to me. So everyone, you heard it here. Sean's going to be getting a lockbit tattoo. So technical problems aside, this is definitely compliance. So that's fabulous. But I'll just carry this on. If anybody has any
There we go. Oh my god. All right. Hopefully you can hear me now. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I just actually I started talking and I said that Sean was going to get a lockbit tattoo, and that if he didn't say anything in the next 2 seconds, that meant he was complying with what I was saying. You didn't say anything because, yeah, so we'll look forward to that.
And the great thing is now I don't have output from my laptop. Oh well.
You're just a
I
talking
almost
brick wall.
made it. Almost made it.
Yep. Well, aside from the last minute technical errors, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, everything I agree with, Lisa. Yes, I can.
See, he's agreed. Everyone's witnessed it. You've heard it here.
Technology is great. All right. Well, on that bombshell, apologies, everyone. I don't know what happened with my laptop. Everything just died. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks for the comments. Ian, Fishin, I think it was someone else earlier on. And thanks, Lisa, for joining. Apologies about my lovely tech dilemma. Don't know what's
Again.
going on. I'm going to find a bin and throw this laptop in there. But yeah. And yeah, there was something that we're going to announce, but we'll probably do it on the next one because, yeah, my laptop's broken and I'm going to go. My
we'll see you next month
like
for a Christmas spectacular.
Right. Have a good one, all.
Bye.
Bye.